Hey guys, it's Chandler, and welcome to the Healing Heroes.
I promise you.
I'm Chandler Stroud, an executive, wife, and busy mom of two, who after years of living with anxiety, health struggles, and an unshakable feeling like I should be happier, made a profound discovery that changed everything. Join me on a journey where unexpected paths lead to healing and more happiness. On this show, we'll explore unconventional ways to unlock more joy in your own life with the help of my very own healers and trusted advisors, the Healing Heroes. Hey everyone, thank you for joining us once again. And today I am thrilled to have Lee, our hero and psychic medium, back here on the show with us. In past conversations, we've talked about the role of spirit, how to tap into your own psychic abilities, and experiences we may have with the metaphysical world. So today, we're going to dig deeper to really unearth the lessons that spirit can teach us about ourselves and make us more aware of our natural tendencies. For me personally, I tend to be a glass half full kind of person, and I generally like to see the bright side of situations, especially now after nearly a year of energy work with our hero and energy healer, Catherine. But in my reading with Lee last fall, she and Spirit found a way to communicate to me that perhaps in some situations, my Pollyanna approach to everything might not be serving an important relationship in my life. Specifically, my ailing father, who needed the space to mourn his diagnosis and express his frustration with the situation he found himself in. It was a good reminder for me to consider the balance. How can I approach my interactions with him from a place of showing true empathy while simultaneously protecting my positive energy and working to raise his outlook at the same time? And quick plug, if you want to know how to do that, we answer this question and so much more in our last episode with Catherine on how to support loved ones going through tough times. But for today, the sentiment I shared around supporting my dad in the best way possible is a great example of how Spirit and Lee helped me realize one of my positive tendencies had gone awry. And so I'm excited today to dive into this topic more meaningfully with Lee. But first, let me introduce Lee quickly to those listeners who may be new here. Lee Morgan is a psychic medium offering mediumship and intuitive guidance readings. After careers in advertising and interior design, Lee couldn't shake the pull to fully open up to and understand her intuitive gifts. She also helps to normalize the perception of psychic work by sharing her own journey openly through workshops, interviews, and information provided on her website. Lee, it is so great to have you back here again. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for having me. And wow, Chandler, I did not remember that about your reading. Sincerely.
Well, it's interesting because I don't think you necessarily framed it as, hey, you've got this tendency that maybe isn't working for you anymore with this particular relationship. But that was what I took away from the conversation when I recalled it and went back to listen to it once again. And I think it was a really important teaching moment for me that has really helped me in navigating the last few months as my dad's gone through, what is arguably probably the most trying time of his life and has made me a more reliable support system. I mean, there's always things I could be doing better, but I think it was a really good way for me to become a little bit more aware of how I was showing up in that relationship. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to learn in our reading together. And very, very relevant to the conversation today because Spirit was also with us in that session and helping me along that path and guiding me to maybe look at myself and a situation that was near and dear to my heart in a very different light. So grateful for that as well. But to kick us off today, Lee, before we get into the meat of today's topic, I'd love to give people just a quick refresher, and of course, our new listeners joining us today, a baseline understanding of what you do. Can you quickly explain what psychic mediumship is so that we're all starting from the same page?
Sure. So I communicate with the deceased to help the living. That's the entire purpose of it, right? And I've given you this example before, but it's like I'm tuned into a certain station on the radio where the deceased communicate. And so I can sense them, right? I can hear, see, feel, and know all internally things they're communicating with me, and I give those things to my client.
Beautifully said. Very well articulated. And obviously, we go so much deeper in our first episode together around how all of that works. So encourage you guys to go back and give that a listen. But I think that was the perfect way to summarize what you do. So we at least have that foundational understanding jumping into today's topic. Building on what you shared about psychic mediumship and how spirit communicates, what role does spirit play in helping us become more self-aware, especially when it comes to our own tendencies?
So this is fascinating to me because when I started my job, I knew I would be translating messages from the deceased to the living. What I didn't really know was how much they would help us refine ourselves in this life to live the most expansive life we can, and how much I would benefit from witnessing or hearing these pieces of advice or these observations being given to my clients. It just never occurred to me that I would be in a classroom while doing my job. And that's exactly where I am. They are very, very loving when they give this information, but they will point out a behavior or a trait or a characteristic that someone has naturally. And I want to go into that in a minute, by the way. So let's go into that in a minute.
Absolutely.
And they will explain how this trait may or may not be benefiting them in a certain situation. And that was the first aha, is that a characteristic, a trait, can be even very widely recognized as an amazing characteristic to have, but it can hold us back or it can propel us forward depending on when and how we're utilizing our own trait. Going back to, where we get these traits, natural traits, we always talk about, they kind of taught me this in conjunction with that, is that we always talk about nature and nurture as humans, right? Like,
yes.
Where do we get this? Nature and nurture, nature and nurture. Well, those things are super valid. And Spirit said to me, well, there's a third thing, your soul personality. So it's really three things. Because your soul will have, now souls are not like humans. They don't have egos. They don't have ego-based characteristics, but they do have personalities. Every soul is not exactly the same. So a soul might be really brave, or a soul might be timid, or a soul might be ambitious. I get that a lot. Or a soul might be kind of lackadaisical in its approach. Or a soul might rush through things, or a soul might like to do things really slowly. So there are traits that belong to souls that we keep after we pass, and we have, I'm sure, before we're born. So it's really three things. And this can be witnessed a lot with people who have kids, especially if you have twins. I mean, twins are the ultimate experiment for everything, right? Because they have identical twins, have the exact same DNA, and they're being raised in the exact same time, in the exact same household, and they will be very often very different individuals.
That's so true. I never really thought about it from a soul perspective. But again, nature versus nurture, bringing in that third layer of soul is really fascinating, because that could be a place where obviously they're incredibly distinct.
Yes, very much so. And so I started to notice a pattern that a lot of what I was being asked to communicate to my clients, ways in which their characteristics, in all honesty, were keeping them from achieving something or finding balance or bettering a relationship. And like I said, what fascinated me is a lot of these characteristics were universally considered positive. And so what they taught me is characteristics aren't necessarily positive or negative. That's kind of a human problem to want to label them. Characteristics aren't by nature good or bad. They just are. And they take on a positive or a negative connotation by how and where we implement them.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And I have a good example about me. I love how we use ourselves as examples.
Well, it's what we know,
Yeah.
right? I was going to ask you later in the conversation, but if you'd be willing to share now a real life personal example that you've experienced with spirit and lessons you've been taught, I would love to hear that.
Yes. I am very independent. And this can be a beautiful trait. It's gotten me so many amazing things in my life. It's also probably kept things from me. But the beauty of what spirit taught me in not judging it and just observing it. You've heard of be the conscious observer. So be the conscious observer of yourself without judging it. Try not to judge and try to find out where and when you might be under applying or over applying a characteristic. So I'm pretty aware that my go-to is to over apply independence. And as a short aside, I do believe it's in my soul personality to be kind of independent. And I think it was beneficial to this incarnation if I was going to do a profession that was outside the norm. So it's very useful there, right? And I also was raised, I'm an adult child of an alcoholic. And anybody who's raised in a home like that, what you learn is traveling alone is the safer way to travel. And I mean like traveling through life, traveling through experiences. So my soul trait was further reinforced by my upbringing, right? So this is my favorite example because it includes you. So you were a client. And when you first reached out, you sent me a lovely email about an idea you had that you did not disclose what it was. And would I be willing to jump on a Zoom and talk about it? And at the time, so I'm a sole proprietor, right? Just like my independent nature loves it. And I really was sick when you sent that. I don't remember what I had, but I thought, oh, this is my internal voice. No, I don't want to join anything. I don't want to do anything. But that's my go. That's like how I've been programmed, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of just said, let's get in touch later. I knew enough about myself to say, let's just get in touch later. Let's revisit it. And so then I think you emailed again. Or I emailed you. I can't remember.
I think I emailed you back. I followed up because you said, let's talk in a couple weeks. So I waited a couple weeks and then reached out and just said, how are you feeling?
Yeah.
Any more interest in speaking?
Right. And I thought to myself, I felt well at the time. And
Great.
I thought to myself, she is so lovely. And I'm interested in hearing what she has to say, but there is no way that I'm going to join anything. I mean, that's just my default, right? But I also kind of laughed at myself and thought, well, that's funny, Lee, just get on the Zoom. So I get on the Zoom. This is how it can benefit you to watch yourself without judging, right? I didn't get called out any kind of like, I stink or I'm a loser or, I got to change or I'll never be better. None of that. It was just kind of a funny joke between me and me. And I got on the Zoom and you can attest to this because you were there. You maybe said 4 sentences to me about how you got the idea and what happened. And I basically said, I'm in. I'm so in. Because what being the conscious observer of myself allowed me to do is suspend myself just far enough from my patterning to recognize my yes in my solar plexus. Right? A yes is like, for me, like I always get like, other people might call this what you're aligned with, what you're drawn to, what is right for you.
Your intuition, maybe.
Your intuition, yes, as we discussed. So I immediately felt it. I mean, and I just said, yes, yes. And also in the background, laughing at myself, going, you weren't going to join, were you?
Oh, I'm so grateful to Spirit.
In the past, when I had not practiced this type of being with myself, I might not have even met you on Zoom, much less joined. And guess who would have lost? Me. Because this is one of my favorite things in my life.
Oh, thanks for saying that.
I and we all can keep amazing opportunities from ourselves by unconsciously defaulting to our programming, right?
It's so true and so well said, Lee. You're absolutely right. I don't know that we've ever thought about it or looked at it through the lens of being so consciously aware of those tendencies and being able to suspend them long enough. Actually, I can't believe I'm saying that. That is essentially what we do on the show, right? Our tendencies are often like the stories we tell ourselves in our mind. And so when you can suspend that and really do what you did, drop into a feeling, that's a completely different kind of North Star.
And I only know this because of my job. Because I heard Spirit say it in one way or another about one characteristic or another to one person, then another person, then another person, then another. I mean, it's universal. And finally, one day in a reading, I thought to myself, I hope I'm listening to this stuff. I hope I'm paying attention because I'm in class. And that was a beautiful surprise. But, like I said, being independent in other ways, I mean, I really wouldn't have this job if I weren't super independent.
That tracks for me. That tracks.
Yeah, right.
I mean, it is in itself. It's really hard to break outside the norm, break the mold, however you want to phrase it, and do something that you see so clearly what can be, but others don't have that vision. They weren't given that vision. You were given that vision. And so only you can go do it. And I think it's really powerful when you can recognize the support in whatever way, shape, or form that comes to you as that's coming together. And I think it's really cool that you have this ability to connect and communicate with Spirit in that way. I mean, I think that's an incredibly valuable life lesson.
It's a position that I ended up in where I get to witness. Spirit's always so sly in the most loving way. I mean, they knew what I would be exposed to, but that wasn't important to get me started. It was like for me to discover, and speaking of doing something so outside the norm for my work, I did my I Am profile on Astro Style.
Oh, Ophira, are you listening, Hero Ophira?
Just to show you how interconnected all of our disciplines are. And this will shock no one that I was an innovator.
Love that for you.
But, and also I want to say the importance of observing these characteristics and refraining as much as possible from judging is kind of the key. Even things that we want to say are negative, like selfishness, for instance. In certain situations, employing a selfish behavior or a selfish mindset can be the best thing you can do.
Yes.
Right.
We have a whole episode on setting boundaries.
Yes. Right.
Yeah.
Other things like, you already brought up glass half full. One that comes up a lot in my readings is caretaking or giving. Right. So caretaking can become enabling, as can giving. And here's the thing about Spirit. They're so brilliant because they understand that when a characteristic is overserved, it harms both individuals in a relationship. It's like the least optimum way of being in relationship, right? So if you're over-serving caretaking, not only are you taking away some quality of life for yourself, you're taking away some quality of life for the person you're caretaking.
Got it.
Right?
I can see how that would play out that way.
The example they always give me with that one is, because people can understand this, is like imagine teaching your child how to ride a two-wheeler, without training wheels and never letting go. And then imagine that feeling you got in your own body that you owned the first time you rode a two-wheeler with nobody holding on. You're taking away that inner feeling of joy and accomplishment and self-esteem from someone that you don't allow to try to do something on their own, even if it's hard.
Right. No, I think that's a really important message. Lee, you talked about your independence and how that was a real life lesson from Spirit for you. But I'm curious, how do other positive traits like being too agreeable or caretaking, for instance, sometimes evolve into something that no longer serves us?
Yeah. So being agreeable, it can be a beautiful way to be in certain situations. Just like I spoke about how in relationship to others, overusing a trait can damage the quality of life for both people. Being too agreeable can actually, if used in the wrong spaces or the wrong amount, can actually lessen an experience for both parties. So if you're too agreeable, you can subconsciously develop resentments, right? And this is just like, resentments are like poison. And especially if you don't know they're there, you can feel agitated. You can feel like nobody ever hears you. You can not even stop to understand that no one is addressing your opinions or your needs because you're not asking for it, right? You're just agreeing. And what it also does is the other individual or individuals you're always agreeing with don't learn the beautiful art of negotiation or compromise or how to walk in the world with others in a balanced way. So both people kind of lose.
Yeah.
It happens all the time. Spirit also always shows me when I have readings, they show me the most interesting visuals. Just to explain how these can be off kilter, they show me a gauge like you would see in your car. You know the temperature gauge in your car?
Yes.
Where like it's cold and then hot, and then your car is always kind of hopefully running in the middle, right? So if someone is underutilizing a characteristic, it'll show to me down a little bit to the cold side. And if someone's overusing it, it's up to the hot side. And so they're always asking them to just kind of like, it's not crazy change. It's just like, let's let off a little bit or add a little bit.
Yeah, it's just a recalibration.
Yeah, it's like tuning.
Love that.
It's like tuning.
Yep.
Which is another reason not to judge. We're not judging it. We're not going to judge the bass or the treble. We're just going to tune them.
Right. But that's, I think, a very common pitfall for most people who might see themselves in a negative light if one of these traits or qualities gets used to the nth degree, right? We're so judgmental. We're so hard on ourselves. And I feel like what you do, human design, tarot, these are great ways to take a real look at where you might have to work a little bit harder and what your opportunities are, but through a lens that lets you celebrate those in some way versus feeling under attack or judged by them, which is so helpful.
I mean, I found the key to navigating anything is to really honestly know yourself without judgment. Just know.
Yeah.
And then you can tune yourself up a little bit in different areas for different situations. And speaking of like how we were talking earlier about nature, nurture, and soul personality, what's super interesting to me is I can't speak to nature and soul personality. Those are your DNA and your soul personality are going to happen. But what's so interesting to me is in the nurture category, most all traits that are either developed or reinforced by nurture are all about being safe.
What do you mean by that?
So if you're glass half full.
Yes.
And you consider that you can overuse that a bit. Like,
yes.
Okay.
I've learned that.
So what that means to me is that somewhere in your upbringing or family of origin or life experiences when you were developing, it made you feel safe to feel like everything was going to be okay. To the point that you maybe didn't look at the actual factual information about the situation. It literally served you. And we don't judge that. We say, thank you for serving me. You could have saved me in these instances, right? Like my independence in an alcoholic household very likely saved me in several instances. But that exact same characteristic can hold me back because I'm not in the same circumstances as I was then.
Okay, now I get it. That's very helpful. And yes, I think you hit the nail on the head. And a large part of the reason that I started this journey in the first place was because all of the emotions, traits, things that served me so well in my childhood to survive some of those tough years were getting triggered in my life prior to starting a lot of this work. And I don't think my nervous system or my body knew the difference. It was really just keep her safe, keep her safe, keep her safe. But like, a lot of the control that I needed, a lot of the organization and things that to your point, really served me growing up in a household where I didn't know what was going to happen next, were not serving me. They were, in fact, holding me back and making me feel a lot less happy in my day-to-day as an adult woman. So I think that's a great example and really brings it to life.
It like goes from being a cape that protects you to being a straitjacket.
Yes. Oh, great
Right?
analogy.
I mean,
Yes.
and speaking of control and organization, um,
Well, let's go there.
well, I'm a professional at those because also, a lot of what made me feel safe as a child was control and organization. Control goes right along with independence. But of course, that was holding me back. And also what's interesting about organization, I don't know if this happened to you, but how much did you get just loads of approval from like teachers or bosses from being hyper organized?
Ugh. I mean, that's like how I got all the grades I got. I feel like they were like, oh, she's got it together.
I mean,
look
I
at that
got,
trapper keeper.
Oh my God, I got special like recognition for having the neatest notebook more than twice. I mean,
That's cool.
This is
That tracks for me too there.
yeah, they mean well, but I mean, this is reinforcing something that's like an adult like this, like, it's, where did I get to be messy? Where did I get to be not in charge of everything? It's like I have to give myself that now.
Oh, Lee, you are so speaking my language. Yes. Yes, we do have to give ourselves that now. But it's so hard.
Maybe this is how another way we can maybe understand how not to judge it is that everybody has something that saved them literally or figuratively or got them approval or praise in their early life that we're so grateful for, and yet we need to tune it up now.
Calibrate it differently.
When I got sober, so you may not know this, but most people who get sober, or the majority, I guess, are lacking organization in their life. So when they get a sponsor in the 12-step program that I participated in, quite often their sponsor will have them do little daily self-esteem tasks like make up your bed or grocery shop for the week or make yourself, it's things that sound normal to people who aren't in recovery, but believe me, they're really helpful tasks. Well, luckily, the first sponsor I got was very observant and I picked well, and she was so on to me immediately that and these are all requests, by the way. Nobody ever says you have to do anything. It's like, are you willing to try this?
Okay.
And what she said was, my suggestion to you, if you are willing to try it, would be to not make up your bed for a week. Because the way you are holding your entire life together is by tidiness and organization. And that is a very slippery slope. And I was like, wow. You know how hard it was for me to not make up my bed? I mean, I felt like my entire insides were unraveling.
I believe it. I mean,
but
that was your crutch.
I can go days without doing it now, and I'm fine. I'm a really happy person in the world. My bed's not made right now. Yes.
I love it. Go, Lee. Look at that progress.
But there will be someone on the opposite side of that coin.
Yes, of
You know
course.
what I mean?
Totally. That's like, that brings me to my like aha moment when I think I was telling a very close friend in town that I was going to do this podcast. And I think we somehow got talking about, the trauma and how that all came to be and how this makes so much sense that I want to do this show and help people. And she was like, Chandler, it makes so much sense now. Like I could never understand why you seemed so stressed out all the time. Like you were so on edge. It's like, she's got these great kids and this job and beautiful husband and house and all these things. And you just, it seemed like you had a really hard time relaxing. And I was like, wow, that's never been articulated to me that way before. But like, yes, that's what I'm healing right now. Like that is what I wanted to go heal. That's the stress and inflammation that was causing the anxiety and the digestive issues and all the things, right? But like, she knew that and saw that in me when I couldn't see it in myself. Mm-hmm. And those moments of realization are so powerful. They really are. And it just made me really grateful that I had already started down the path of trying to heal a lot of those things so that I could recalibrate that tendency of wanting organization and control and certainty. And now it's not that those things aren't there, but like I know when to turn them up and down.
Yeah. And you know when they're actually improving your life versus giving you a false sense of security.
Right.
Right?
Yes. Even when you are recognizing that maybe that trait characteristic is not calibrated to the degree you would like it to be in that circumstance. Going back to what you're saying, being able to notice that without judgment is so, so, so important. And I think that's the other thing that a lot of the healing work has taught me. It's like, okay, you really want certainty and control in this situation. Why? What are you feeling? What's driving that? And I can get curious about it. And then once I understand it, I can be like, okay, you don't have to turn it off. It just is what it is. And that's okay that you're feeling like that right now.
Yeah.
And like showing yourself that compassion can go a long, long way.
A long way. Also, figure out what you really need.
Yes.
Like if I
good one.
suddenly feel like I need to make the bed and vacuum the house and put all the dog toys away, what do I really need? What am I feeling unsafe about? Because that's just a Band-Aid.
Totally.
You know?
Yeah, it's so true. It's so true, Lee. So true. It's often something else, an undercurrent, something underneath.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a really good point. I'm curious, since we're on this topic, I think now that we've gone deep into this topic, I'm sure a lot of our listeners are starting to ask themselves this question of what are my tendencies that I might need to revisit or, recalibrate given this conversation. And I'm curious if there are specific practices that can help us tune into these messages so that we're more aware of how and when they are being delivered to us by spirit.
Wow, that's a great question. So trying to think of probably the easiest one to do anywhere, right? You want to be able to do it anywhere. I just got a message from Spirit.
Amazing. Oh my gosh, guys. Spirit is joining us now for this live interview with Hero Lee.
They said one word, urgency. So if you feel, and this, I'm going to have to define this a little bit because it's a feeling of urgency in your body. You know how that feels when like you've got to do something or you've got urgency is the indicator. So if you feel like I need to answer that now. So an example could be even work. If you get an email and you don't really agree with it, but the whole idea of thinking about it makes you nervous and you just respond, okay, like agreeable, but you don't agree with that work idea. For instance, the feeling you had of getting it off your plate quickly because of the urgency was kind of an indicator that it's asking you to behave in a way that you're probably not normally comfortable with. Right? And you don't like, not you, but anybody doesn't really love that. The human body does not love that.
We hate discomfort.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's like a lot of what we talk about on the show. We have to face it, but if you're uncomfortable sitting in it, you know that feeling and you want to run away from it or get it off your plate to what you're saying as quickly as possible. Yes.
And so the key there is to pause. Right? So don't do anything. There's this saying in recovery, when you don't know what to do, do nothing. That in and of itself can be really uncomfortable. So for instance, 99.9% of emails do not need to be responded to within 5 minutes, despite what our cultural conditioning and everybody's fastness will imply. So pause, do what you need to do. Go feed your kids, go take a walk, listen to some music, watch a show, read a book, sit quietly, whatever. And then ask yourself, what do I really feel like is my truth about this situation? What do I feel in my body now that I've removed myself from it and taken a beat? I mean, breath work would be great here, right? Because if it has to be answered quickly, you could just do breath work. You could just move away and do some breath work and then come back. Because the truth is, and I'm saying the truth, but I mean like the grand truth of like, if it's a work email, you have that job for a reason. Your true answer, if it's constructive and kind or respectful, is always going to better the project or better the team. But you may, because of your tendencies, feel hesitant to inject your opinion, right? Or you may, because of your tendencies, feel like you want to scrap what they said and start over and have your own idea. When really neither of those is probably going to be the best result. The best result is going to be take a beat, You want to get it off your plate. That's your sign, the urgency. Take a beat, check in with yourself in whatever way you do that, or take as much time as you can, and then ask yourself in that time or after that time, what is the real, true, best answer here? And how can I deliver it? Does that help?
Yeah, I think the urgency, that was a great, impactful message from Spirit. Well timed. And I think what you're saying about take a beat and pause is, I think back to when we were talking about how to hear Spirit in your own life, and you always say, get quiet.
Yeah. Well, the
Get really
key
quiet.
to really surfing, I like to think of life like surfing it. I like to think it like fun. So the key to really surfing every experience is to practice enough that most things you're responding to instead of reacting to.
That's a great distinction. Great distinction.
We'll maybe get 100% there. But if I'm just saying majority, if a majority of the time you feel like, oh, I responded, I didn't react, that's just winning.
I want that as a bumper sticker on the back of my car. Respond, don't react.
And you
Love
can
that.
only respond if you take a beat.
Yeah, because it's so intentional.
Yeah.
Reaction it's not driven by intent. But a response, there's purpose behind it.
Yeah. And if you don't want to wait for something to kind of instigate this practice, you can always just really sit down with yourself and say, honestly, how do I respond in most situations? And just go through a list. Am I usually agreeable? Am I usually disagreeable? Am I usually a leader? Am I usually a follower? Am I usually impatient? Am I usually patient? Because really, the truth is all of these are beneficial in some scenario. And, am I usually independent? Am I usually really need to be in a group?
I love that. I'm curious, just building on that, I think, how can we then trust the guidance that we receive from Spirit when it might challenge the qualities that we've always viewed as strengths?
Well, yeah. That's an interesting unwinding of cultural conditioning, right? Because that's an illusion. I may possess independence in a quantity that is really kind of cool sometimes. But remember, that same quantity is really not cool sometimes. So how then can that have a value judgment? It's very dependent, Now, I can be proud of utilizing my natural independence in appropriate situations to appropriate levels. I can be like, I'm awesome. But what I'm really more proud of is my ability to moderate that when it's not to my benefit or the benefit of others. That's where I'm really proud. So it's really just changing our mindset, right?
Yeah.
It's like, think of it. They always give me fun examples. Like, think of it like the gym. So if you go to the gym, you know how people always say, I'm doing arms today, I'm doing legs today, I'm doing abs today. Everybody always has a favorite, right?
Yes.
If your favorite is arms, and you do arms all the time, and you kick butt at arms, and you love arms, and when you do arms, you're like, I'm awesome. Think how happy you feel on those days when you're like, you know what? I did legs today. I don't like to do legs. I'm awesome. And you got arm muscles that are great, and your poor legs need some assistance. So they're all parts of us that we don't have to judge, or we don't have to get all of our self-esteem from. We can just say, I have great arms, but when I do legs, I'm really doing something.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that, Lee.
Yeah,
That's great.
No problem.
That really brings it to life. For listeners. Lee, what's the most surprising thing in your mind that Spirit has taught you about yourself through the work that you do?
Well, one, that they've taught me about myself at all. I wasn't expecting that. But that they have really taught me how to be a compassionate observer of myself and be willing to change my behavior to match the circumstances.
I love that answer. And it jives with our reading together, my experience with Spirit. But what I love even more is that it is consistent with what a lot of the other approaches we talk about on this show also provide, which is to get to know yourself without judgment. And I think it's an incredibly underrated, powerful ability that can completely change your life when you learn how to do it effectively.
It takes practice. It does take practice.
it takes so much practice, which is why it's a journey. It takes practice and it's a journey. It's not an overnight flip the switch type of thing, but it's worth it if you stick with it and that that's what you're trying to achieve at the end of it all. Be a compassionate observer and ultimately build your self-worth, because again, so many times subconsciously it's really not in a good state, which is why I love all of you and the work you do, because it really shines a light in those corners that need attention. And I just love it. I really love it. Lee, in your experience, how does spirit help us balance being of service to others with taking care of ourselves?
One, if you're in a reading with me, they'll point out which way you're leaning, right? And ask you to tune it a bit. If you're in regular life, a couple of things can occur. One, you'll just have a general sense of discontent, which is kind of the same thing as your car having the engine light on.
Love the analogies. Keep them coming. That's great.
And you can ignore that discontent for as long as you want, but just like ignoring the warning light in your car. So that's one way we get I call them clues. We get a lot of clues from spirit. That's really how they come. They don't come like a burning bush with a guy's head popping out, giving you like a paragraph. That's one way, is just discontentment, irritability.
I've known that one well.
Showing up a lot in places that it really doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And then the other kind of clue from spirit will be if you find yourself in similar situations over and over and over. This is really easy if like you're trying to work on assertiveness or boundaries. You'll find that the universe provides, and when I say spirit and the universe, by the way, to me, they're interchangeable.
They often are throughout the entire show. Yeah. So love that.
The universe or spirit will provide you with so many opportunities to practice boundaries. So either you'll just feel this discontent or irritability within yourself, or you'll notice your outward world is kind of giving you the same scenario over and over and over in different places in your life. That, believe it or not, is how spirit communicates with us. And I want to be clear, because so many humans judge this as punitive, right? Like, I already did that. I already set a boundary. I already got brave and set that boundary. Why am I in another situation where I have to set a boundary? Your higher self and the universe and spirit doesn't think of it as punitive. They think it's like you competing in the Great American Ninja Course and getting through it once and then being so thrilled with yourself, you're like, let me try it again, right? Because that's a hard thing to do. But right. I would do that with like an obstacle course. If I did a great job, I'd be like, ooh, I want to try that again.
Yeah.
But we don't think of it with that lens when it's something like setting a boundary. But that is how your higher self thinks of it. Like, you want to get good at it. You don't want to just do it once. You want to get proficient. So if something's showing up over and over, your higher self wants to become proficient in that behavior.
Okay. That's a really good takeaway certainly for me and hopefully other listeners, because I often think like, I've made so much progress here. Why do these situations keep happening to me? But I'm making the connection now as you're talking. I can see how living those moments and those situations over and over are strengthening a muscle that will get me to this end goal of peace or whatever it is down the road. For me, it is peace. That is the word that I am looking to live and breathe and feel deep in my bones every day. I think that's a really good way of describing it. That's a real aha for me in terms of, and it also speaks to, we say the universe doesn't do anything to you. It does things for you. Yes. So these scenarios keep popping up because it's happening for you to learn and to master the skill.
You want to get so good at it. I mean, different lives will have different goals. But like in my life, boundaries was a real thing. My soul wants to get so good at it that when it's necessary, my nervous system doesn't even flinch.
Yes. Amen to that. And absolutely.
That is a journey. That doesn't happen from setting one boundary or two boundaries or three boundaries or four boundaries. I mean, it happens from you just do it until one day you're like, oh, they want me to do this and I don't want to do it. And it just doesn't even raise your blood pressure. It's just like, oh, I'll just tell them how I feel later. No big deal,
Yes.
But I do want to be clear about that because I hear from so many individuals that they love to use the word lesson, which I do not like because I feel like in our culture, lesson has a punitive connotation. I don't feel like it's neutral, right?
Yeah.
Lesson could be neutral, but I don't believe it is
be.
when we use it. So I don't like to use the word lesson. I like to use the word opportunity, which might make somebody want to throw something at me.
No, that's such a 360 review term. What are your opportunities looking to next year, right? It's a kind way of packaging, here's what you can do better.
Yeah. But back to like physical fitness, you wouldn't do a hard workout one time and be like, I did it, and then move on with your life.
So true.
You know, you do it probably a lot of times.
Yes.
And you would reap the benefits of that. And you wouldn't feel it on day 1 or 2 or 3 or maybe even week 2. You know?
Yeah, I think that's great. I think that's another really good. I love our gym and fitness metaphors for this conversation. It really brought a lot of these topics to life for us today. And I just always appreciate it.
They're so good at, Spirit knows that we get caught up in judgment, especially around certain things, emotion, ourselves, anything to do with ego, right? So they try to put it in a world where we would never have that response to show that the same behavior is happening here and you're fine with it. You know? Yes. So why are we getting so weird about it when it's in here? It's the same behavior over here. You know?
I do know. I really think that's, again, what makes a lot of what all of the heroes on the show do so powerful and effective, because it's just giving you a different way to look at the problem that is going to resonate with you maybe better, like maybe human design over astrology or mediumship over tarot. Like it just totally depends on the person. But what all of these approaches do is it really helps you take a look at some of the things we've been talking about today, those tendencies, and just looking through a slightly different lens and putting it in a perspective that you can see it without judgment.
Yeah.
Which is the most important part. And
they gave me
a little bit of an aha
analogy this week. Do you want to hear it?
Yes, of course.
I don't know how it applies, but this one was in regards to a romantic relationship, which I think most people can understand. This analogy was given by Spirit. So for reasons unknown to me, when two humans aren't meshing, somebody always wants somebody to be wrong, which is not always the reality. So right. Spirit gave it to me like a jigsaw puzzle. And this can be true about anything in life that we're not fitting with, a job or a city or a friendship or a romantic relationship. They said when we find a situation that's not fitting us, we try to change our shape and we judge ourselves and we look at all the things that are wrong with us, or we do it to the other person, right? Mm-hmm. And they said when you're doing a jigsaw puzzle and you know those pieces you pick up that look like they're going to go right there, and then you go to put them and they don't quite fit, you don't then pick up that piece and go, you are a ridiculous, stupid, horrible, dumb piece. You don't do that. You just go, oh, okay, that's not the piece. And then you go try to find the piece.
I mean, that's poignant. That really hit home with me, Lee. That's great. Thank you for sharing that Spirit analogy. And it does have some application to what we're talking about today beyond just relationships. But I love that visual. I do. I really love it.
I was like, they're just fascinating.
They really are.
You would never do that. You would never look at a puzzle piece and like go on some tirade about what it needs to change about itself.
No. You would never
say that piece doesn't fit. Let's move on.
It has a very important purpose somewhere else in this puzzle.
Yes.
The puzzle isn't complete without it.
Exactly.
It's got a role, but it's just not here in this place.
Yeah.
I love this. Okay, we're going to make a note on this, put a pin in this. We're going to talk about it in another conversation.
I just had
you
to
heard
tell
it here,
somebody,
folks.
Because I tend to forget what they say sometimes.
I mean, I write it down as much as you can. I know you do, but that's a good one. In fact, I'm going to write puzzle metaphor.
I remember that.
Well, that's so good. Oh my gosh. I'm like, I might, if I didn't need to keep this clear for recording, I would just like what I've learned from Spirit. Be a puzzle piece.
Be your own puzzle piece.
I swear, all healing. The reason we are here, I'm so convinced, 30 conversations about this now, it all comes back to self-worth. It does. just accepting yourself as you are, and not just accepting, but loving. And if you can do that, the happiness, everything else falls into place. It's the secret to life. Lee, this was such a fun conversation with you today. Thank you, as always, for being here and bringing your expertise and your vulnerability. I love our time together. So thank you for this conversation.
You are welcome, and thank you. I love it too.
And to those listening, if you liked today's discussion, please share it with friends and don't forget to subscribe. You can also visit healingheroespodcast.com to get resources, meet the heroes, and share your ideas for future episodes. Thanks for listening, everyone. And until next time, remember, be curious, be courageous, and be kind to yourself. You've got this.